everybody, this is Robin with Creative2xmom, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the books we read in the month of August. So welcome back to my channel. My name is Robin and this is Creative2xmom. This channel is all about homeschooling, parenthood, and thriving in the day-to-day. And today's video is going to be about this great big old pile of books that I read in the month of August. At the end of each month, I like to share a video like this one, sharing with you the books that I read personally, as well as any read-alouds that we did in our homeschool. So my summer months are always a little bit heavier on the reading because I'm not trying to divide my time prepping lesson plans, but I also feel like I do a lot more young adult children's lit in the summer as I am finding books for my kids. Sometimes I want to do some pre-reading, and sometimes I just realize that they have found some really good books that I want to read as well. So the month of August was a pretty heavy reading month because we didn't start school until halfway through. Some of this is some continuing education, some of it is some personal interest, and then some of it, like I said, is some pre-reading for the kids. So grab a glass of water, cup of coffee if you're watching this in the morning, maybe some Energize to get your day going, and let's check out the books that we read in the month of August. So I think I'm going to divide these into fiction and nonfiction. So let's start with the fiction. In July, I will link July's video down below. I shared with you that I found this series of books that were Amish retellings of classic fairy tales. They're by Sarah Price. In the month of July, I read Belle, which was a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. And that one so closely followed the fairy tale that it wasn't quite as interesting because it was very predictable. Despite that, I decided to go ahead and pick up Ella, which is an Amish retelling, of course, of Cinderella. This is the second one in the series, and I found this one to be much more interesting than the first one. Sarah Price still does a good job of bringing in a lot of those classical story elements from Cinderella. She retells that classic beloved character in a fresh new way. So this story pulled away from that classic fairy tale just enough to keep it interesting. So we have Ella, who lives with her stepmother Linda and her two stepsisters, and there are a few people in the community who start to see how the stepfamily treats Ella, but they're trying to work around in a way to bring Linda to that realization. The problem is Linda has taken over the family business that Ella's father established and was supposed to be passed on to her, but now it's been passed on to the stepmother, and she's kind of driving the business into the ground, whereas Ella has a very strong business mindset and she knows exactly what she could do to save the family business, and that's where it pulled away from the classic fairy tale and really got interesting. I would recommend the second book over the first one any day of the week. I know there's a third in the series, so I'm interested to know if it's quite as engaging as the second. The next book I have in the fiction category is a book called Forest World by Felix Salten. I had never heard of this book. This is the same author that wrote Bambi. I had never heard of this one until I was doing a search on Rainbow Resources, I believe, and this one came up as a recommendation. I love living books like this that take concepts from nature and can tell them in a story form so that your kids are learning these great biology concepts, they're learning about animals and ecosystems and the way the world works without even really realizing it. This was a really cute one. I'm glad I reread it. I'm going to be passing it off to my 6th grader. He is probably right at the tail end of being interested into this one. I would say this is a little bit more 4th grade, 5th grade, but definitely well worth the read. So then I had a couple of sort of biographical, sort of historical fiction. The first one I have is Mary Jones and Her Bible. This is by Mary Ropes. This is the story of Mary Jones, who was a little girl, and she had such a hunger and a thirst for the Lord's Word that she would spend all of her time doing odd jobs so that she could get enough money to get a Bible. And then when she walked to get one from the pastor, he didn't have enough because they were so rare. It was her testimony and her story that inspired the British and Foreign Bible Society that was established in London to get more and more Bibles into the hands of the common people. This one for me was one of those stories that you might read to your kids as inspiration, because here was this little girl that she just knew she had a hunger for God's Word, but through that it changed entire nations. It changed the way people thought, and it really had a push for making Bibles more accessible. Great little story, quick, easy read. I read it in just a couple of days and then I handed it off to one of my kids. The other book that we had in the historical fiction category that I read was called Fallout. Now you'll know in July I shared that I read the previous book to this one, and I cannot remember. Oh, it was called Bomb. So I had Fallout on my reading list. I realized it was actually a continuation of the first book, so I read that one first, and then Fallout is the story of the Cold War and the race for just arming the nations. And it goes into a lot of detail about how Russia was strategically placing themselves, how the United States was strategically placing themselves, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I felt like I learned so much from this book, and yet it was a very easy read. It's written probably at about 7th, 8th grade level, and you almost forget that you're reading nonfiction because of the way that it's written. It takes you deep into these people's story. It takes you into their personality, their anxieties, their fears, the things they struggled with, both foreign and American, and you get a really good look at what was happening at that time. I learned so much more from this book than I probably ever had in all my years of history. I was doing it as a pre-read because my plan is to add it on when we get back to modern history here in just a couple of years. So let's talk nonfiction. The first book that I read in the month of August in the nonfiction category was Better Together by Pam Barnhill. I have spoken about this book numerous times. This is my summer read in preparation for our new homeschool year, getting ready for our morning basket. And all I can say is it is well worth the cost. If you are thinking about putting together a morning time basket for your homeschool, this is definitely a great place to start. And it's a book that I come back to again and again. I've talked about it so much that we will just leave it at that. I'm sure you've heard a lot about this one. The other nonfiction book that I read in August is Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal. This is by Ben Sass. I picked this up thinking it was going to be very political, and I was thinking about, okay, how do you bring the two political major parties together? And this was not quite what I expected it. I just finished it last night, and so there's a lot of ideas from this one that are still running around in my head that I am still wrestling with. Really, his idea was that politics cannot solve the divide in this country. Politics has not created the divide in this country. Politics is merely a symptom of the divide that we are experiencing. And why is that? What are the causes of that divide? How have we ceased being neighbors and fellow Americans and become enemies? In a lot of ways, what is dividing us, and how can we bring that divide back together? Like I said, really not what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be a lot more politically focused than it was. And I was delightfully surprised in the direction that he took it. Because I have to wholeheartedly agree, there is so much divisiveness in our world today that we are essentially destroying ourselves from the inside. And is this irreversible? Is there a way to reverse courses? I would bump this to the top of your reading list immediately. This was written pre-2020, and I have seen a lot of his ideas accelerated just in the last 2 or 3 years because of what we've gone through, because we've been so isolated. And I think there's a lot of really good ideas to wrestle with in this title. We read one Read Aloud with the kids this month, and that's because this was a lot longer book than I expected. It was The Green Glass House by Kate Milford. I went online, happened to have this one recommended for families that love mysteries, and it did not disappoint. There was constantly another twist, another turn. You have this little boy named Milo who is in his family's inn just at the start of Christmas vacation, and they get a bunch of guests that get snowed in with them. Well, throughout the course of this, we have a bunch of thefts going on. We have a mystery in the house of who the original owner was and what happened to him, and who is the thief amongst all these people. So he makes friends with this little girl named Betty, and they start to track the clues throughout the house. They are investigating the guests, they get them to tell stories, and through the stories that these guests tell, they learn more and more about them and their backstory. And for some reason, all these people who just happen to be snowed in at the end are somehow connected in their outside life. They all have this connection. And so he's trying to figure out why they have this connection, who the thief is, and really what has brought them to this house. We just finished this one last night as well. It took some major twists and turns at the end of the story, but my kids loved it. They were hooked from page to page, cover to cover, and we would read this one again. So that's all that we read in the month of August. What do we have on deck for the month of September? Well, I just finished 2 books, so I am still kind of deciding what's coming next. I'm not entirely sure. I do know for my fiction read that I am starting with this one. That is The Breadwinner by Deborah Ellis. This was also recommended in the Sunlight World History curriculum, and my daughter has read it, my son has not. I think after I finish it, he will probably read it too. Very good story so far. I'm probably about a third of the way through and enjoying that one. For my nonfiction book, I think I'm going to start with The Living Page. This is about keeping notebooks in the Charlotte Mason philosophy. I shared a video in July about the notebooks that I keep, but I have never actually read a whole lot on notebook keeping in Charlotte Mason. Just a little bit, and I'm kind of dipping my toes in that arena. So I'm curious to see what the author has to say. This is by Lori Bestvater. I think I will start with this one. This seems like it would be a good continuing ed book for September. So that's everything that I read in the month of August. Leave me a comment down below and let me know, what are you reading, or is there anything here that you would like to pick up after watching this video? I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time. Bye guys.